Hello, this is Vivica Williams, and welcome to Head to Head. Recently, the Ukrainian government banned several Russian websites, including popular social media networks. This ban has, as expected, led to heated debate. Joining us in the studio to discuss this issue is Tanya Cooper. She is a researcher at Human Rights Watch, based here in Ukraine. Tanya, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, tell us the specifics of this ban.
Well, I mean, from the point of our organization, it's a very broad ban on social media, news websites, and other companies. And this recent decree that put in force this ban actually expanded the list of companies and individuals that are under sanctions in Ukraine. So I think right now it's over 1,000 of individuals and over 400 companies that are under sanction in this country.
So the Ukrainian government has cited security concerns. What do you think about this allegation?
We certainly recognize that Ukraine is, as a country, is in a profound state of crisis. It's political, it's military, but there are also other problems. And we say that in our meetings with the government of Ukraine, but at the same time, we see this ban as a blanket ban on social media, on news websites that that affect and violate the right to freedom of expression of Ukrainians, to their freedom to choose information of their liking, and this kind of reason. And the struggle that Ukrainian government is engaged in vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis the propaganda that we recognize as a very, very serious threat, shouldn't come at the expense of people's rights. And I feel that the government should be more cognizant in their fight against Russian propaganda of the rights that it's taken away from millions of Ukrainians.
Well, Facebook, as we know, has a lot more things in place to prevent, like, the posting of certain things, to try to weed out unreal accounts. Do we see this with a contact here with the Russian social media site? Is there a legitimate issue here with their using this to spread propaganda, to recruit people? Is there legitimacy there?
Well, as you know, any social network is has a horizontal structure, so it's virtually impossible to control everything and to filter the harmful, insightful, hateful information. And I know that Facebook does it way better than VKontakte. I worked on several issues, such as, for example, homophobic and transphobic violence in Russia and other countries. And I know that it's been very difficult to convince the administration in VKontakte and Odnoklassniki to remove that information, which showed extreme, images of extreme violence against gay people in several countries. At the same time, this again is not enough reason to ban the social network completely. It's I feel like it's also not respectful enough vis-a-vis Ukrainians, who again should be able to choose, should be able to enjoy their right to either read certain information or not. And many of them do. Many of them, actually, I think we've seen many interviews where they say, well, I have VKontakte account, but I don't use it because I don't like what I see there. Right. And again, I think the concern that many expressed is the lack of dialogue with the public. Right. And that's what, I think is very apparent here.
So do you think it is possible, if the government had presented this correctly, to ban certain sites like this without this issue?
I think it's very possible and probably very needed to ban certain groups on social networks, not just VKontakte, Odnoklassniki or Moy Mir, but Facebook also, is full of those, and not just, those that concern Ukraine or Russia, but, as we know, in the States also, it's a big problem. Again, those groups probably should be banned and should be, limited in how they present their information, but not, again, I see this as a blanket ban,
right,
as a lack of dialogue and lack of trust in public to know what's right.
So what would you, you've made some suggestions here, but how, this is such, cyber war is real. How can a government, or how is it possible to pick and choose what to ban?
Well, I'm not going to advise the government
right,
on how to censor content, but what I can say is that it would have been much better and much more effective, in our view, to fight, for example, very, again, harmful Russian propaganda by investigating how Vkontakte, for example, is not safe for not just for Ukrainians, but anyone who uses it. Mm-hmm. How, for example, Vkontakte, cannot keep user information safe by either providing it to the security services in Russia, or by not, having certain procedures in place that keep the user data safe.
Secure, yeah.
Also in Russia, of course, we have the Yarovaya law that requires
right,
many businesses to keep the servers in Russia and keep the user data and metadata on the Russian soil. That's a very big concern, not just for Ukrainians, but anyone who uses those social networks. Those are very convincing arguments to show Ukrainians, hey, Vkontakte and Одноклассники are just not safe. They won't keep your information safe. Choose wisely when you communicate with your relatives or with your colleagues, or just use social network for entertainment.
Right, and so there are definitely legitimate concerns, and we saw a few years ago, I don't remember exactly when Vkontakte was being forced by the government to turn over materials, to turn over information. So these sites are legitimately used by the Russian government for whatever type of cyber espionage crime, whatever you want to say. So the issue is not, in your opinion, specifically about that being legitimate. It's how the government carried out this ban and how they've relayed this to the public. Is this right? Well,
no. The fact of the ban of the entire websites and social networks, and the, it's not just, how they presented it. Of course, it has not been very respectful vis-a-vis Ukrainian public, but it's also, again, no government can fight internet. And, those governments that do try, for example, China, Iran, and Russia, does Ukraine want to be in this company? They fight the internet because they want to limit public discourse in their country, because they don't want to have a dialogue with the public, because they don't want to hear feedback. Right. I don't think that's that's in the interest of Ukraine and Ukrainians to limit that dialogue. And that, honestly, again, I think it's to the detriment of the freedoms that were worn with a lot of difficulty in this country.
Absolutely. Internet security across the world has been a big conundrum for governments. Do you know of any successful examples of governments being able to have more regulation or to do more to protect against this infiltration of propaganda and crime through the internet?
Well, again, I'm not a cybersecurity expert, so, but what I can say is that the answer cannot be a blanket ban. The
Absolutely.
Answer cannot be so disproportionate and so broad that it limits millions of people from access to information of their liking. That's not what Human Rights Watch says. That's what international obligations of
right.
Ukrainian government says, and that's what that's what the Constitution provides for the people of Ukraine.
So what do you think about the EU Parliament, the NATO, saying that they respect this with Ukraine as being about security concerns and not limitation of freedom of speech?
Well, first of all, what the NATO said is that they heard the arguments, yes. and that they trust Ukrainian government right. to respect the to respect its commitments to democracy and the rule of law and international law.
So in a sense, this is trying not to,
well,
to make statements in general.
I think it's a very diplomatic but not very conclusive, you know, I certainly don't see it as a support of this particular decision. What I have to say is that it's been devastatingly disappointing not to hear more international voices coming from EU, US, other countries that are, you know, that are partners of Ukraine, that provide political, financial, economic, you know, moral support to the Ukrainian government and to the country in the state of crisis. I think it's very harmful that EU and others are keeping silent on issue such as this, because again, the problem is not about Kontakte or Odnoklassniki. The problem is such a broad ban and such a, you know, clear attack on freedom of expression, and especially because it comes after this you know, recent law that, for example, included anti-corruption activists and journalists on the list of people that need to declare their private assets.
Right. So do you see this kind of as a slippery slope for Ukraine with
well, I think it's an understatement. I certainly see it as a very, very fast, you know, sliding into again the times when Ukraine, you know, when Ukraine lost its commitments to democracy and to the rule of law, and that's again what's important here is that does Ukraine want to be a democracy, or does it want it to be a country where social networks and media and other websites can be just banned by a decree?
Okay. Well, then I think we're going to have you back on as this develops to see what the outcome is and what the next steps the Ukrainian government and also the EU and other supporters take. Thank you so much for being with us today, Tanya.
Thank you.
This has been Vivica Williams. You've been watching UATV's Head to Head. We've spoken with Tanya Cooper from Human Rights Watch. Thank you and have a great day.